The whole idea here is that we teach our children how to be financially independent. Just talk to your kids, right? Every conversation can be educational.
Whether we realize it or not, we're teaching our kids financial lessons all the time through our own behavior. How to make a big purchase, how to read the fine print, and when to ask questions. These are critical life skills, but are we talking about them enough? Today, we're covering the essential money lessons kids need at each stage and how to start the conversation. Hello, and welcome to Money on Your Mind from Edelman Financial Engines. I'm Michael Liersch, a behavioral scientist, financial planner, and your chief planning officer at EFE. Thanks for joining us for a conversation about how people are feeling about money, what they're wrestling with, and how financial planning can help you straighten things out. Today, we're talking with Kelli Smith, an EFE financial planner. We've had Kelli on the podcast before. So Kelli, welcome back to Money on Your Mind.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So Kelli, I know you introduced yourself before, and I know our audience or some of our audience and our listeners know about you, but if you could give us a little bit of where you're coming from into this profession of financial planning and why you're so passionate about this topic around critical lessons for young family members and ultimately why you're passionate about serving clients.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm based in Raleigh, North Carolina, though I have clients all over the country. I have been with Edelman Financial Engines for coming up on 16 years. Um,
Exciting.
yeah, it is. I know. It's what days are long, but years are fast. So it's flown by. So I serve the Raleigh Greensboro area now, in addition to everybody that I work with across the country. I have a blended family, so we have 5 kids from 10 to 17, and so this topic is really, really near and dear to my heart as we're trying to build good habits with different personalities. It's a lot of fun, but I'm looking forward to hearing some of the feedback that we get just with ideas that's working for everybody, and we'll get into that, I think, as the show goes on.
Let's go ahead and start with the key question I think that everyone is thinking about, which is, this notion, and you and I have talked about this, that parents want the best for their kids, but talking about money is tough. So what are you hearing from clients on this topic of talking about money, the importance of it, but this challenge and struggle to broach the conversation, whether you're in a small family like the one I'm currently in, or the blended families like you're in, or I've been in before?
So it runs the gamut, and where the people that I work with, they'll start teaching grandchildren, when it comes to college education and college accounts. And so it starts there and goes all the way up to my children are in college and I'm not sure that they're going to ever be financially independent. And
We hear that
so,
one a lot, Kelli, right? That concern, which
yeah,
is a really interesting one.
it's something that we're constantly navigating and talking about is how are how are we interacting with our kids, and are we setting them up with the tools that they need in order to not be boomerang kids?
So tell us a little bit about that, from that bank account kind of idea and money to, jobs when you're teens, all the way to this, like, when my child graduates, will they be able to be financially independent? Like, give us some of that narrative that you're hearing in terms of why that's not working, or where maybe there's some elements where it is working.
I think the common theme here is that neither generation, the generations are not talking about it with their kids, maybe for 2 different reasons, or a variety of different reasons, but we're not having the conversation and the lessons about money. Whether we want to create those lessons, which I do with my kids, I've got a couple stories I can share, or just in the moment. So I think we miss out on the opportunity to just, even with little lessons, to educate our kids in a way that gets them to critically think about money.
So when you think of all of those moments, share with us a couple stories, either that you've learned from your clients, or that you've had in your own life, where you took an opportunity like that and there was a reveal on the other side, something that our listeners and audience could apply in their own lives with their own families.
Yeah. Mine's a funny story. My son is almost 13 years old, and he is very big into biking right now. And he insisted on buying a bike that I thought was too expensive. But we had an agreement. I'm not going to pay full out. But I said, okay, your bike is going to cost, $1,500, let's say. You have enough money in savings to pay for a third of it. I will pay a third of it. But then you have to work the remaining third of it off by working X number of hours at $8 or $10 an hour, right? So we look to see kind of what the going rate is around here if he were to do some hourly work, mowing a yard, cleaning out trash cans, and whatever that looks like, cleaning cars, detailing cars the way a 13-year-old would. And so he is now actively trying to get that paid down. But now he wants, a game chair. And so I'm like, okay, well, you have to add that. Again, you have to pay for a third. I'll pay for a third. And now he's starting to see kind of debt accumulate or going backwards, if you will. So he hasn't purchased the game chair. You take the wind out of their sails a little bit. And we don't ever want to see our kids disappointed, right? We love to see our kids happy. And I think that's why we do purchase or spoil the way that we do to some degree. But in this particular case, I felt it was a really good lesson to say, I'm not going to do this for you in its entirety. You have to have an employment plan and a repayment plan before I'm willing to put my third in. And so we've had some tough conversations. He's not exactly thrilled with me sometimes, but he also understands. I think the more we do that, the more it sinks in.
So let me ask a question on that, because there's a huge narrative out there in families where, there's a question of applying the same ideas to all the children in the family. And so, you mentioned your son's 13, you're taking him through this lesson here of bike purchasing, all the rules and parameters around it. So are all your kids going through this experience? Is fair equal in this case? And this goes all the way to Kelli. You hear it in terms of estate planning and gifting as well. Do you split your wealth, upon your passing or when you're gifting in life, equally amongst all your children? What's your motion here, Kelli, on this topic and your advice?
That's a highly personal, I think, a highly personal question that, listen, if two people coming together, especially when there's a blended family, can't have the money conversation first and foremost as dating gets serious, it's going to just be very challenging for them, I think, down the road. You have to be on the same page always. And I've done, other interviews on that in the past. For us, we're very aligned on money. We're very aligned on values. So it made it very easy for me to say, hey, there's 5 of them. We have 5 kids to get through college. So how much are we going to contribute to each of them for their college? We're going to handle all 5 of them the same. If you want this to purchase this, you pay for a third, we'll pay for a third, and you work for the third, right? And so it does apply to all 5. But that is unique to us. And I feel like with our values aligned so well that it's made it a lot easier to have that conversation with each of the kids.
So share with me, when it comes to something that we deal with all the time, which is paying for college, and this is coming up across the board. It's a whole narrative of the United States. Is college worth it? What's going to happen on the other end? How do you help clients think about this idea of borrowing for college, paying for college on behalf of their child, having their child have skin in the game on the topic so that they use that, 4, 5, sometimes 6 years in the best, most productive way possible? What's your advice there?
Yeah, I think that, again, highly personal. I think that you do the lemonade stand approach, which is you go to college for a certain reason, is to get educated for a certain job. You have to know, maybe not in the beginning, but as you weave your way through, what am I going to do on the other side? How much does that job pay on average? Knowing you're not going to make that average from the very beginning, right? Maybe later in life. And is that job going to be able to pay your student loan payment? Right. So if we go a student loan route, then we need to be able to pay it off. And so that's going to influence your choice of schools and your choice of careers, and your college visit. So that's number one. I think the second side of that is, parents who do want to pay for college, I fully support it. But you can borrow for college. You cannot borrow for retirement. you can borrow for almost anything except retirement. So again, I think it's unique to the situations. And for those folks who have retirement covered, and you want to help pay for college, I still think some kids should have, skin in the game. But that's unique to my kids, all of them. And so whether it's a third, maybe there's they pay for a third of their college. You use retirement account, or not retirement, but college funds, or just other investment accounts. And then, sometimes you can cash flow a third. So again, highly unique, but it's something you really should consider. And it should be by kid. To your point, you have to meet your kids where they are.
You didn't say this outright, but the transparency on the trade-off here. If you're a parent deciding to help pay, however much that level, full, a third, two thirds, whatever that amount of money is, highlight that you're making a sacrifice for your own financial future. Then let's back up to then a younger kind of category of human. So when you're making those decisions to provide an allowance potentially, or spending money, or give money for certain asks, do you have any frameworks for parents and grandparents on that idea of allowance or gift giving, and the parameters or the rules of the road around it?
Well, this is something I'm still learning myself. So, I have some ideas on things that I'm doing for my kids now that I'm like, oh, maybe I spoiled them a little too much. Maybe they don't understand exactly how lucky they are. They're growing in a very different environment than I grew up, and so this is something I'm still learning. But I love having the conversation. If a client comes in and we're having this accountability or enabling conversation, most of my clients are very open to having a conversation about it.
So when you think about then this idea of role playing and broaching the conversation, so let's say it's an allowance. How do you have that conversation?
So what I started doing with my children was we use the Greenlight app, and I like it because it allows me to assign lessons for them to learn. So hey, when you do this 10-minute lesson, I'll give you $5 for doing it, and it's an investing lesson or an interest lesson, or how banks come into play. So for my family, it's worked out really well. So they get a $15 allowance per week, but it's broken down, and they get half in their spending money. They get 30% then in their savings, and then they get the remainder goes into an investment portion. And so we can all see the app, and grandparents can transfer money. And so now this is how they can receive gifts, but that's the split goes. So every time $20 is received for a birthday, right, it's automatically split, which is fantastic because then they see how that plays out. And then my kids have seen how the investing goes up and down. But here's the thing, in order to get that allowance, there are things that they have to do in the house or in the household that are above and beyond a normal chore, right? You doing your laundry is not something you get paid for. That's your laundry or your dishes. So, this is one of the things that I learned from a few of my clients of, we don't want to reward somebody for doing the basics. We want them to be rewarded for doing, above and beyond what they should be doing.
You want to pay your kids to brush their teeth, for example.
Right.
That would be a bad idea. Okay.
Incentive drives behavior. And so I think if they're incentivized to do something that they should already be doing as part of the household. How many parents are stressed out working and trying to get kids to different sports? Those kids can wash their own uniforms. At least in my house, that's what I think. So now how do you, I guess, pivot to the college conversation of, okay, if your college is going to cost, and, I sit down and I just rudimentary math with the 10-year-old all the way to more complex calculations with the 17-year-old twins is the oldest ones. And then we get to talk about at different levels that, how much are you going to be possibly spending on college? How much savings are you going to have by the time you get there? How long would you have to work? What would your monthly payment be, right? We'll just do a quick payment. And again, various levels of details for the age. So it's age appropriate. But and that goes right into the next thing. Well, what about a mortgage on a house or a car, right? And so I think you can take the concept and apply it to about anything.
Let's go to mistakes that people make within either the conversation, the frameworks that are set up, right? The kind of bailouts or, soothing and smoothing, or making it easier on yourself as a parent, as opposed to harder to teach those lessons, the no's versus the yeses? What are at least, maybe just tell us, since there's so many mistakes one can make in the zone, what's one key mistake you
Yeah.
see people making in this area?
Yeah, I think it's we talk to our kids and even other people kind of through our own lens, which is an understandable thing to do. But when we're trying to educate, and this is a podcast about education right now, we have
Yeah.
to look at people about where they are. So, a lot of us will feel maybe a little bit of shame, or we get like, oh, I maybe shouldn't have done that. I don't want to expose, my own financial habits to my kids, or whatever that looks like. But that's looking through our lens, our own personal lens, rather than meeting them where they are. So what does this child need to learn in this moment, or these children need to learn in this moment? And how do I make the most of this? Whether it's I've created it, or it's just an opportunity for us to, in the store, to have a lesson.
I think that's really important. So let's move to our last question that we always like to ask in the podcast. So, what's one thing that everyone listening should do right now when it comes to this topic of talking about and setting frameworks up and setting kids up for success when it comes to financial matters?
Give yourself some grace, right? When it comes to this, whatever your habits have been, it's never too late to build better ones, because it's, that's going to help you in the long run, right? And if we think about, we don't want to be a burden on our kids later. Well, it starts with habits now, but give yourself some grace if you haven't been doing that to this point. And then start looking for the little moments, right? There's big teachable moments. We talked about those today: cars, houses, college, but there's little teachable ones, right? What does it mean to have it 10% off when you go to the store, or buy one, get one half off? Brand versus generic, whatever that looks like, just talk to your kids, right? Every conversation can be educational. My kids groan sometimes when I start talking about interest, but but they know it, and I think that's the end result that we're looking for.
And I like this idea, especially in the digital age, even with digital purchases.
Mhm.
A lot of clients that I work with, Kelli, they actually do that with their kids. I love this idea of taking all these moments and giving it maybe a little, like twice as much time to do it, but it will pay off like compounding dividends in the future. So, Kelli, any last words for our audience before we part ways?
No, I appreciate it. This is something that's near and dear to my heart, not only because I have my own children, but because there are our younger kids are struggling right now with money, like with the cost of living, and we know it's a challenge. I think the more that we educate them, the more prepared they're going to be creative in overcoming whatever comes their way, as they get older.
And one thing, and I'd like you to double down on this, and I want you to say it in your own words. I really think too, you stressed teaching these financial habits and lessons also makes you as a parent or grandparent potentially more solvent in retirement yourself. So can you share some last words on that before we part
Yeah.
ways?
Absolutely. The whole idea here is that we teach our children how to be financially independent. And sometimes that just comes by way of teaching them habits, right? We do it with food, we could teach them good food habits, or good exercise habits, good schoolwork habits. We want to do this with money as well, because when they know how to handle money, then we're free to, I guess, save for retirement, keep more of our retirement dollars in there, and then we're not bailing them out as much in the future. And every dollar, what is it? A penny saved is a penny earned. And so, if we don't want to be a burden on our kids later, by, maybe we're going to have to live with them for, instead of assisted living because we can't afford it, then teaching them now how to be financially independent, so that we're not spending more of our retirement dollars, gives us more money to work with later if we need any of those funds for assisted living or healthcare expenses.
And it probably makes us more intentional too, as parents and grandparents, with our own money, because we
Yeah,
want to model the right behaviors. Kelli,
that's right.
I, I can't say how much this has been great for me too. I wish I could talk to you every day to keep me on track. So I hope our listeners really heed some of your great wisdom here. And I just want to thank you again for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay, so that's everything we have for today. This has been Money on Your Mind. A big thanks to financial planner Kelli Smith for joining me, and we'll be back next Wednesday with a new episode. Subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube so you don't miss it. And we'd appreciate it if you left us a rating too. I'm Michael Liersch from Edelman Financial Engines. Talk to you next time.